existence. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the world is intertwined today much more than it was when some of us were coming out of school. Because of that, we really need to have a deep understanding of cultures around the world and around the country as well. Civilizations always become richer and more colorful through exchanges and mutual learning from each other. And such exchanges and mutual learning form an important drive for human progress as well as global peace and development. And forums such as this enable direct exchanges and dialogues among civilizations and people. Creativity speaks a universal language. It has meaning and relevance for all people, regardless of their nationality, culture, or social backgrounds. Hybridity breaks the barriers of peoples, underscoring the values, the feelings, and longings that are shared by human beings. I wish you a productive symposium. At this juncture, I take this opportunity to invite our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research, Innovation, and Outreach, Professor Caroline Thorua, to officially welcome you to Kenyatta University and to officially open this symposium. Thank you. Welcome, Professor.
Our guest speaker, Mr. Mutumba Marangu, the main coordinator of Horizon Europe, Communities and Artistic Participation in Hybrid Environment Project, Professor Jakub Kuba Petri, members of management present, regional coordinators, members of staff and students present, all participants in the Caphe Consortium, presenters, virtual reality enthusiasts, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. It's an honor and pleasure to welcome each one of you this morning to Kenyatta University and to the symposium New Coordinates for Creative Hybrid Space Experiences. I wish to extend a special welcome to all our visitors who traveled from other countries to this symposium and those who are also participating online from Kenya and other countries. Hearty congratulations to the consortium for winning the prestigious European Union Award for this project. I knew it took a lot of hard work and dedication to get to this point. I'm reliably informed that the Caphe Consortium brings together institutions from 7 countries with the aim of investigating the possibility of establishing an enhanced mode of interaction between artists and communities through the virtual reality platform. The potential application of virtual reality are truly endless. In the field of entertainment, we can already see how virtual reality is changing the way we consume media. From immersive gaming experiences to virtual concerts and events, virtual reality is giving us entirely new ways to engage with our favorite forms of entertainment, as well as getting experiences that until recently were restricted to fantasies and dreams. Indeed, we can currently point to the fact that in the field of education, VR is already being used to provide students with immersive learning experiences that are simply not possible with traditional teaching methods. Students, as well as members of the public, can now explore historical sites, experience scientific concepts in action, and even practice real-world skills in a safe and controlled environment. I'm happy to know that in Kenya, and specifically here at KU, the Caphe project will emphasize art to promote relationship building through learning, action, and the expression of needs and values. It is exciting to note that the Caphe project has recognized the potential of utilizing art to foster community engagement by strengthening the degree of public commitment to planning processes and making the perspectives developed available to decision makers. As your host, we at Kenyatta University have taken note of the particular interests that you have as project facilitators and will do our best to ensure that the aims of the project are met. We are aware that the project will require us to organize workshops and exhibitions, and have some form of civic engagement through art making and programming. We will support you in all these efforts. I'm also aware that the project will run for 4 years and that this is the first mobility. To our visitors, once again, welcome to Kenyatta University. We hope that you're enjoying your stay and are on target to meeting your goals during this secondment. The Caphe project is certainly a win for Friends of Kenya to understand Kenyan customs, history, culture, and social development. We look forward to more cultural exchanges and cooperation between Kenya and the 6 countries in the consortium through the Caphe platform. I trust that this symposium will be a valuable platform for both academics and art practitioners and the general populace to learn more from each other. I also hope you get an opportunity to visit our country and meet the local people in their communities and therefore have a fruitful visit and stay here in Kenya and at Kenyatta University. I wish you all a very fruitful deliberation during your symposium, and I now declare the symposium open. Thank you.
And I will take this opportunity to invite the main coordinator of the Caphe project, Professor Kuba Petri. Thank you.
Dear friends, I didn't prepare any notes, so we'll be speaking from my heart. I would like to, first of all, say thank you to our hosts who are also coordinating us here in Kenya. For most of us, it is first time in Africa and first time in Kenya, and we feel safe and happy, and everything goes well. Each of our activities was realized, so the plan is being realized well, and now it's time, very important time, to have some reflection, to look back on what has been done, and to also coordinate our actions for future. So this is the time of the symposium. And from this place, I would like to especially thank two organizers of the symposium, Polish Society for Aesthetics. I will not mention the names because they were working all very, very hard, especially for last 3 days. I didn't see them much, so it means that they were working very hard. So probably they had a very busy time. I would like also to thank organizers and all participants. And not forget to mention the yesterday's event organized by Carla Zanin and Federico Bardazzi, which was also a part of our symposium. So yesterday we had a fiesta for our souls and bodies. Now we have some time for a reflection. And I will not take more time now, and I would like to invite first speaker, our keynote speaker, Mr. Mutuma Marangu, renowned art collector, who is important part of our project. He's participating in actions of Polish Society for Aesthetics, but I think his interaction with VR technology will be a kind of inspiration for all teams, because this is like good exemplifications of our idea of interacting between physical and digital world. So Mr. Mutuma Marangu, please, now the stage is yours.
Good morning. First of all, I want to be sure that we have the presentation. Okay, while we wait for that, first of all, thank you very much, DVC, for your kind reception. It's very good to know that you're in the chemistry sector, which we both share a common interest. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not my my normal day job. My normal day job has been historically in the petroleum and energy sector, and I've now moved into middle carbon, which would be biofuels, and I also am focused on solar renewables, which basically meant that we had a common interest with the DVC. So it's a pleasure. As I start out, it's going to be it's going to be quite a journey, if I'm very open with you, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to say, as we start, thank you. Thank yous first to Caphe and the organizing committee, who have been very helpful to me. We will get the technology right. I'll wait. But let me start by saying thank you to an event which happened where my business partner Amit Shah met with Marlena Chaibowska Butler and her husband Rick. That led to an introduction to Professor Alexandra Alcaraz, and also then to Dr. Bogna, Gladden Obidzinska. And then that ultimately led, by the way, that happened in 2021, and that ultimately led to me meeting with Professor Jacob earlier this week. And from there, I would like to say that success has many parents, and failure is an orphan. And I'm hoping that we'll get to a better place where this process will start working, because I have a lot of slides to get through. While we're working on that, I'd just also like to say thank you to Caphe for providing the Mutuma Marangu Sculpture and Art Collection with the challenge and opportunity of reflecting on its old coordinates history, as well as preparing the foundation for its new coordinates. Conceptually, this keynote address will be focused on running to the carrot rather than running away from the stick. It looks as though this is most unfortunate, because it is a long this is a very long if you can. We'll get there. That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let them proceed. Can we go back to page 2, please? Is it working now? Okay, my name is Mutuma Marangu. Now I think we'll start. My name is Mutuma Marangu. It's a pleasure to be your keynote speaker today. Look, with all humility, we have a lot of slides to get through, so I'm grateful for that. But you can save for the applause for later, depending on whether you still like me afterwards. But this is Team MSAC, and this is the group and the collection that I founded. I won't go into the reasons behind it, but what I will do is I will say, I don't know how we managed to lose that. Faris, why don't you just basically tell them I'll tell them manually to move to the next slide. It's clear that this is not going to work. Okay? Next slide. Page 3. The good thing is at least they have the presentation. Can we go to page 3, please? Okay, thank you. I'll tell you when to move forward. This is the TMMSAC core team. And by the way, this presentation will be made available through Caphe. I am doing this because I think at the end of the day, we'll all know why I'm talking the way I'm talking and why I've presented what I've done, because I want to put, for lack of a better way of putting it, a platform from which anyone who wants to engage with me and with the collection will understand how we're going to proceed. And I think some of these constructs, which I'm sure have not been established by many art collectors, are going to be definitely defined by me so that we understand how and in what way we will operate. Now, this photo here is very important. This is a photo with the TMMSAC core sculpture team. And they genuinely, I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, they are world-class sculptors. But as it is written in Matthew, biblically in Matthew 13:57, when Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town and own home." I think that these 4 sculptors are amongst the best in the world, but sadly, for now, Kenya does not appreciate them. The person and by the way, this is also part of the reason why I've accepted to have this engagement, because I do believe it is the right time for them to enter and understand. The person on the left, next to me, I'm in the middle, is Peter Kinyanya Oendo. He is the pioneer TMMSAC member from 2006. He's the person whom I first collected. He, by the way, is a stone. I don't know whether this is working. Yeah, this gentleman here. He is what I would call a stone listener. In essence, he lets the stones talk to him. By way of information and by way of definition, I've decided to bring one of each so that you can understand the different styles. You can see this is a quartz, but you'll see that basically the contours of the sculpture itself, he works with the sculpture rather than talking to the sculpture. So he listens. The second individual, Jared Mutonde Oro, this gentleman here, I would like him to stand. He's actually physically present, and he is a KU. Jared is the monument man. He's the National Monument sculptor. And he is a person who KU should be very proud to have as an alum. I will also add that I do believe that there are opportunities to work with Mr. Mutondi that remain unexercised. We will talk about unexercised options during the course of this discussion. So that's Mr. Mutondi. I've decided, he's arrived. I told him that he's not going to speak because today I'm going to speak. And then after that, everybody will want to speak with him. So I'm very happy about that. The third person is Charles Duke Combo. He is what I would call the most complex. Sorry, by the way. This is Mutondi's maquette of a 15-ton monument, which is right now at Roslin Academy. But it is important to understand the process from going from this maquette to a 15-ton sculpture. And it is unique in many ways, and the processes which we'll go through very quickly will be ones which I think will be enlightening, and also notice the different style between Kinyanya and Mutondi. As I said, Charles Duke Combo, he is the most complex, and he's the most traditional. He is what I would call a person who works with Kisi stone. He, unlike the other three artists, sculptors, has remained focused on the use of hand tools versus power tools. And we'll discuss the geological implications of that, in particular for Professor, in terms of the hardness of stones, which over time have now led us to where we are evolving from hand tools to power tools. The final individual is the youngest member of TMMSAC, Robin Okeo-Mbera. Robin Okeo-Mbera. And Robin is what I would call a stone talker. He talks to the stone. He's actively involved in directing the shape and manner in which the stone emerges. This is a small representation of what you can see, the strength of the contours. Very, very hard, very, very precise. He's also the person who we'll talk later about who evolved in what I would call the Afro-Cubist movement, which he started himself. This particular piece, by the way, has additional meaning because of its impact on climate. This is what I would call a carbon positive stone sculpture. All of these little dots here are CO2. This is actually, when you look at the science behind carbon capture and storage, this is a living example of what it looks like in practice, which most people don't understand. I'm going to spend a little bit of time. Next page, next slide, please. Page 4. Sorry. Yeah, page 4, please. This basically is a very important page. I'll spend a bit of time on it. Basically, TMMSAC is an active practitioner rather than a passive theoretician. And we have been working in what I would call the private individual rather than the public community space. This is how the collection has been focused. These two unreconciled constructs intersect with the two words that Caphe presented for this discussion, which was new coordinates. These two unreconciled constructs will be crystallized, hopefully, through this keynote address, through what I would call a time and space, latitude, and interdisciplinary longitude dialogue and construct, which we'll get into. Next page, please. Next page. Now, this is quite intense. As I said, this presentation will be made available to everybody because I'm not interested in playing hide and seek with people. I want people to know where I stand on things. Now, what has been very helpful in this whole construct for me has been to answer the question which we had dialogued with Professor Alexandra and her colleague before, Professor Alexandra, and also Professor Jacob and his colleagues, as well as Dr. Bogna, were talking about this sort of aesthetics and the way of thinking and approaching. So what I had to do was I had to go very deeply back into my construct. And again, I'm not an art. I've never studied art, okay? But what I've understood is from my economics background, the need for what I would call problem solving. And this construct, by the way, is very important. And I will say thank you again to Caphe, because through this construct of reconciling myself to myself, I am able to apply it actually into the climate discussions. So I use this as a whole dialectic from which to actually begin the process of thinking through problems which naturally are not easily resolved. Now, on that note, I will be the construct from which this presentation is being built and made will be along three lines. One is Professor John Kay's 2010 book called Obliquity, which basically talks about an iterative problem solving and reconciliation of what has been presented as new coordinates. Going back in time, which is something that I also learned recently, this issue of the Alfred H. Barr's 20th century approach to Cubism and abstract art. And finally, the just published January 2023 Cultural Evolutionary Behavioral Science in Public Policy Construct. The reason why I have been looking at this in that context, and I continue to learn and evolve, is because there is genuinely a disconnect, which I see not only between theory and practice, it's disjointed, but also between global north and global south. Now, Caphe has provided this as an option to convene this intersection of the two, and it's very much my interest in at least presenting a strong global south, representation and framework. I'll say the final point, which again was just published. I thought was a very interesting article in Art e Critica 85, which is an Italian, if I'm correct, an Italian publication, which talked about collecting in its January edition, talked about collecting in the age of sharing. It highlighted the DSL collection, which noted that collecting should not be erroneously identified as a result, but as a process, a state of constant adjustment in which the questions, doubts, and new trajectories can be fully explored without betraying one's DNA. I thought that was an extremely powerful and important construct, which I also am adopting as an African art collector. Next page, please. Page 6. This is a book. This is a book that I've not written yet, but this is a book that I started in 2021. I must say, to resolve and reconcile myself. It will be the constructs upon which we will discuss further going forward how to make things work. But basically, for lack of a better way of putting it, on the left-hand side, you have the forbidden taken, which basically deals with the issues of restitution, repatriation, and reparations. That area is inaccessible, and rightly so, by African art collectors today. we are not able to participate, rightly so, in its history vis-a-vis the rest of the world, specifically Europe and America and even Asia, because of restitution issues. On the right-hand side, in the present, which is the phygital and digital side, I have coined what I call the aspirational given. That is where we will be resident, sitting and talking going forward. To me, this remains an area that remains undefined. It is one in which I will hope to learn from all of you as members, and in which I also will take what I learn and process this, hopefully, to create a 1 + 1 equals more than 2 process. I think we can go, let's go to the next page, please. Very simply, this journey is not for children or most adults. Most people can't handle this. So let's just, can we go to the next page, please? Page 7. Yes, this journey is not for children, and it's not for most adults. I just want that to be on record, because most of the people that when I interact with them, I don't like to interact or engage, because a lot of them don't know where they are in time and space. So this journey that we'll be taking is actually for serious people who want to understand things and reconcile themselves to themselves. Next page. Page 8, please. Now, this is just basically the cover sheet. It's basically foundational concepts and constructs underpinning the development of TMMSAC. Next page, please. Page 9. Page 9. One must learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think this is a very important point that I take every time I'm engaging, is that we are perpetually being challenged. Sculptor Motondi is perpetually being challenged. He resolves and reconciles himself through his sculpture work. I resolve and reconcile myself through processes where I'm able to write and understand what he's actually applying. Next page, please. Page 10. We're going to spend very little time. In fact, page 11, please. Thank you. This is important for one very important and essential process. This is the difference between obliquity, which basically means instead of going this way, you have to go this way in order to actually go that way. Okay? The difference between obliquity and directness. Now, most people are focused on purely being direct. I am focused on purely being obliquity, with the view that if you go the oblique route, you're likely to achieve much more very quickly and resolve yourselves. But it is also, as I said, not for children, and it's not for most adults. Please, let's continue. Page 12. Basically what we'll do, in fact, go to page 13 so we can make progress. This is something that I coined, which I thought was very helpful for me to understand the importance of Caphe's hierarchy, which I coined Caphe's hierarchy of obliquity, which basically dealt with high-level objectives, intermediate goals, and basic actions, which is mirroring Maslow's hierarchy of needs. To make a long story short, what we will be focused on is in this sector here. High-level objectives. Next page, please. Basically, my question, which I will be hoping to begin to process and understand, is as it relates to the concepts of new coordinates for the creative hybrid space experiences, is to actually ask whether the Caphe thesis statement where does it sit? Where does new coordinates for the creative hybrid space experiences sit within K's hierarchy of obliquity? Is it at the top, at the middle, or at the bottom? Because I think that, to me, is something that I'm still working through, and this is the reason why I'm here at this symposium. And I will look forward to hearing from all of you in terms of answering that question. Next page, please. This is more issues and problem solving. I think we'll make progress. Page 16, please. Now this is a page that basically dealt with the construct and definition of obliquity versus directness. I've decided I'm going to actually, in the final presentation, make a slide because I am an economist by training, and I see things visually, the way in which Mutondi and the core team sculpt. So, but I will say that obliquity versus directness, I'll go very quickly through these, but they will be put into a single page. Relates to obliquity, deals with uncertain, unstable environments. Directness deals with certain and stable environments. Obliquity deals with complex systems or objectives. Directness deals with one-dimensional system objectives. Obliquity deals with opaqueness. Directness deals with being transparent fully. Obliquity deals with methods of solutions unknown beforehand. And directness deals with methods of solutions known beforehand. Finally, obliquity deals with outcomes unpredicted and unexpected, and directness deals with outcomes predicted and expected. And the reason behind that is because that is how I began to reconcile myself to myself, that this is going to be an iterative construct. There's no right or wrong, but there's an understanding of where you feel comfortable entering or not into this construct. Next page, please. There are no shortcuts to greatness, only long cuts. So for me, the process is not intended to be a shot in time, but it is a stream. Next page, please. This is basically, I thought, was a very interesting jacket cover of Cubism and abstract art. I would hope that as an outcome of deliberations, ultimately, that Caphe may be able to define diagrammatically what they see and they view as the new coordinates. So that was a challenge both to myself and also to you as participants. Next page, please. I'll just note that Mr. Barr basically applied scientific constructs to social sciences in order to create that diagram, and basically did note that he viewed his museum as a laboratory, which I thought was an interesting construct and concept, and that it was for experimentation and learning. Next page, please. This point here relates basically to what I consider to be a fascinating tree, which you can see has a base, a strong base, and interestingly enough, there is an acknowledgement of African art on the side. I do find this fascinating because this actually should be here, from which the seeds of all this has now evolved, but it is not, it is on the side. But I do find the acknowledgement also quite powerful from 1933. We're back to the future. Next page, please. One must learn to exercise embedded, unexercised options. I continue to say that you'll be hearing me talk a lot about things that are there but are unexercised. So I'll give, again, Caphe a lot of credit for exercising the option of asking me to be the keynote address speaker. Not everybody would do that, but that is the whole construct of learning to exercise the embedded options that one will have as they go along in this journey. And by the way, there are no rights and wrongs, but there are that construct of embedded options. Next page, please. That was a misstep. Next page, please. Page 23. This is a very fascinating article. I really wish, and that's why it was published 3 weeks ago. I read a lot. This talked about the evolution of behavioral science and public policy. And the reason why this is important for me is basically because I think, having read this article from a cultural psychologist, it resonated with me on points that going forward, as I engage with you as Caphe, individually and collectively, they registered very important constructs that I think need to be present and remain relevant. Next page, please. This in particular, what I thought was a very fascinating slide, which I would hope that you again would take a look at. Again, all of the references are there in the presentation. But basically, it deals with combinations and experimentation. And I do think that where we are right now within this whole construct of new coordinates necessarily means that we should be very aware of biases and views as we enter into these constructs that were there. Next page, please. A lot of stuff here. Basically, I will point you to page number 3. Note number 3, which talked about weird people problem. I actually had to look it up, and weird people problem basically deals with the empirical basis for many by behavioral insights and biases, heuristics, and assumptions about human behavior that are skewed towards Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic people who do not represent most of the people in most places. Now, this was very important for me because as we start out in this construct, I think it's very important that we understand this. And I'm, as a Kenyan, presenting this so that it can be very clear that intellectually there are people who are ready to engage if you are ready to exercise the option of us doing that, okay? That's very important, number one, as point number one. And you can look at this. It was not me. It was from January 2023. The actual final point, which is point number 5. So this was this point here about weird people problem. And point number 5 dealt with integration with other fields. I actually believe that you will see implicitly through what we do that explicitly we naturally, and Mutondi is a great example of that, he integrates himself in multiple fields all at once as an artist, and that it emanates from art to the other sectors, not the other sectors into the art. And it is not being understood and judged and understood for that, for now, which is why he is a prophet who's not honored in his own hometown, biblically. Next page. By the way, I hope I'm not boring you. Let's go to page. This deals with actually the outlines of many of the things that are there. I will go to page 20. Hold on just a second. Let's go to page, because I don't want to, page 32, please. Page 32, thank you. Yes, what I also liked about this construct was the fact that its thesis statement was, if it does not work in the real world, it does not work at all. So this also came out in this specific article, which I thought was incredibly poignant and very insightful. So for me, I'm pleased because it was almost like art collectors' relief, because as art collectors, we are dealing in the real world. But meanwhile, our artists and a lot of art historians and art people involved in art may or may not be as physically grounded as we are. So this also creates the right construct, and I want this, by the way, this is a platform that everyone should be able to embrace, should they wish. And if they don't, they should know that these are my parameters for engagement. But that's why this was important. And with the knowledge that the marriage between cultural evolution and behavioral science can produce more effective methods for developing public policies. As we relate to communities, we're dealing in the public space. That is why this is important. Next page. Page 34, please. Foundational constructs and concepts depicting and articulating the reconciliation is very important. Next page, please. My perspective is very simple. One is wise to embrace change before change embraces them. When change embraces you, it may embrace you in a way that you're not happy with or you're not comfortable with. So I prefer to embrace it before it embraces me. Next page, please. Longitude, now this is very important. Let's go to page 'cause I don't want to spend too much time here. Let's go to page 49. The next slide. Yeah, okay. This slide is important for the difference in perceptions over time. And by the way, just so you understand what I'm talking about, I'm talking about longitude and latitude, which will be something that you will see in the constructs that I have created. But I wanted to actually put this into historical context, which up until this point in time, and again, I thank Caphe for creating the environment for me to actually have to challenge myself to do the thinking. If you notice here, no, next slide. Yes, this is very important. In the 13th century, 14th century, basically power was through religion. You'll go back into this, what you'll realize is the center of the world was Jerusalem in this map. And the UK was right here. If you look at what happened in the early 20th century, which by the way is the period corresponding to the imperialist UK strength, the world pivoted, and its center was here. And Africa, you can see, is on the side, and you can even see Asia is actually sort of, it's basically a skewed approach. But that again was power through imperialism. This slide here, this point here, this map here in 2018, and by the way, there's a lot of supporting documents which we've skipped because I want to basically make progress. This is power through economics, which is 2018. Now, what's interesting here is you can see China, and you can see North America, and you can see Europe. Notice Africa. Africa is incredibly, from a purchasing power parity standpoint, very, very small. Now, what I'm here to tell you and inform everyone is that circa 2100, in the 22nd century, Africa is going to be the largest continent in terms of demographics. It is going to make a lot of the other continents look quite small. I actually am here to say that the work that we're doing right now needs to understand that if good constructs of thinking are not put in place, with roughly 49% of the population, global population, being here, there's going to be some challenges. And also, that is why I personally, as an energy person, am focused on speaking to you. Because culturally, I realize that I can have much greater impact through my art collection than I can through my work in energy. Transparently. Next slide. This is an important slide because although it's a little bit skewed, but basically what this shows is that this slide here deals with old coordinates, which is 19th century. And in essence, what happened culturally is that the art from Tropic of Cancer to Tropic of Capricorn went from Tropic of Cancer up to the global north. That is the 19th and early 20th century, okay? That has shifted and will continue to shift as repatriation, restitution, and reparations happen, and a lot of art starts coming back down and starts going east. Now, this is a construct which I think people, again, I found I needed to implicitly understand and process, and is also part of the importance of the good work that you guys are doing now in forming this Caphe construct. Next page, please. By the way, how much time do I have, Dr. Bogner? Wow, this is not enough time, but I'll try. Thank you. Thank you. We can go more into this depth, but let's make progress. Let's go to page. Let's go to page 58, please. Now, this is an important slide which basically, sorry, let's go back to page 57. Go back to page 57. This is the original slide that I created to depict the impact that art had in Kenya in circa 2021. Now, you notice there were 12 points, and for lack of a better way of putting it, all of these emanated from the nearly extant Elephants and Rhinos exhibition, which Mutondi and the other core team members were party to. There were four areas there of interest, which, by the way, were hosted, and we received 24,000 visitors at the Nairobi National Museum. Now, go to the next slide, 58, please. Now, what's important here, circa 2023, and that's why each time, from a time and space perspective, it's art first, from which everything now interacts between, amongst, and around. And what I've realized is that through art, one can appreciate, process, and reconcile themselves to these 14 metrics. Not 12, but 14 metrics, okay? And that also gave me, as an art collector, what I call black art collector's relief, because I had been trying to understand how one would collect in this time and space. Next slide, please. Now, this is also a very important slide, which I learned and decided to take. Now, if you notice, this is for the Caphe organizing team. This is how I understood the concept of new coordinates. Longitudinally, time in continuum. latitudinally time in continuum. Longitudinally, space expressed through impacts, and those are shots in time. So, in particular in 2021, there were 12 impacts, metrics. In 2023, there are 14, the additions being digital and carbon. Now, all of these interact between, amongst, around themselves. And this is how I have reconciled myself to the construct and defining what new coordinates means to TMMSAC. And I hope this can also provide relief to others who are trying to grapple with what that does mean in practice. Next slide. As I say, one should continually understand where they are in time and space. Next slide, please. This is also another coinage which I am applying not only to my collection but also to my work in energy. I call it a multiflexion point analysis. For lack of a better way of putting it, what I believe the world is now at, simply put, is we have global issues. Let's say the war, the very unfortunate and tragic war in Ukraine, which has impact around and amongst nations, then falls into between nations, which falls within nations. Okay? Now this, some people call this a polycrisis. I call this a multiflexion point. And what is happening and what's different between a polycrisis and a multiflexion point is that you can have different points happening all at the same time. Some may be triggered, others may not be, but the impact will be, you as an individual may be impacted because of those three levels of change. And again, this is where I say to Caphe, thank you for providing me with the problem that I now had to evolve and solve. And this is what I consider to be a very important point, which I will now be applying into my daily business life. Next slide, please. This is also important. This informs you on how I look at the difference between private, individual, and public community engagement, okay? Within the realms of physical, phygital, and digital. Now, make a long story short, I have been focused resident in the individual and private sector because, for lack of a better way of putting it, I don't have the energy to be in public spaces without things definitely defined. Now, that is why this construct of the coordinates, new coordinates, needs to be very well defined, especially within the African and a Kenyan context, okay? Now, for me, this phygital area here remains open and undefined, and despite what many people may say on the digital side, I'm not anywhere near there right now. But that is where I'm looking forward to learning from you in the symposium. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's a good one. If you're strong enough, there are no precedents. Next slide, please. So you understand that a little bit about the depth and width of TMMSAC and its active engagement in Kenya. We have not really done a lot to publicize what we have been doing. This is probably the most high-profile occasion that I've been asked to speak at. But basically, it starts with what I call an intraflexion point, where I bought my first piece from Kenyanya, 2006. You can see now that we have many different points of reference, which we'll quickly go through. and it finishes with the invitation to speak today. Next slide, please. And we'll move very quickly now. Now, this is one of the areas. 2007 was an inflection point, a multiflexion point, when the iPhone came out. This picture, so the storytelling is still not done, and everybody has their own story. So the question really, I say, and I challenge everyone as well, now, as we start this, is who edits and why these new coordinates? Next slide. We'll go very quickly through this, but this is a very important process. This was the original sculpture in 2008-9, where I met Mzee Elkanah. I like to be very transparent in terms of people should know how and in what way I've known them, so that I don't, if I know them, I know them. And he basically created what I consider to be the next level of rock and stone sculpture in Kenya. To be very precise, he created a sculpture that could remain outside. And Mutondi, who's by far the best person to explain this, and you should probably, again, find a time to ask him to speak, can explain to you the importance of the degradation of Kisii soapstone, which made monuments impossible. Next slide, please. This is a very important historical slide. This is the ambassador at that point to the US. This is Mzee Elkanah, the master sculptor. This is Minister Ntimama. And this is a gentleman by the name of Alan Donovan. This group here more or less originated this whole construct which Team MSIC has been created its platform and sits on today. Next slide, please. I like to do show and tell. This is me, and this is my daughter who's now in America. And this is Mzee Elkanah, his wife, and importantly, this is Charles Duke Combo. That's the first photo of him that I have before he joined us. Next slide, please. That is where it stands. It stands till today. I think it's five tons. Next slide, please. Predicated on that previous slide where you saw Ambassador Ranneberger with the minister Ntimama, with master sculptor Elkanah, and where you also saw Alan Donovan. They came together again for a very particular monument, which is arguably the largest rock and stone monument in Kenya, dancing birds. Now, I was involved in it, simply put, through purchasing of a lot of exhibition-size sculptures from those working on it. And that is also, you'll see the time in which I met national sculptor Gerard Matondi. Next slide, please. This is Mzee Elkanah, and if I'm correct, that is Gerard Matondi working on site in Kisii. He can tell you the story behind it. We don't have the time, but it's worth listening to. Next slide, please. This is an important slide also because this shows the handover of the sculptor in Kisii from Mzee Elkanah with Matondi as the master of ceremonies to the US ambassador. Next slide, please. Again, some more show and tell. This proves that it was there. Interestingly enough, this is Robin Mbera, and this is Matondi as well, from circa 2010. Next slide. Next slide. And by the way, you'll be able to see this in your presentations. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Let's go to page 79. If you want to understand what makes TMMSAC unique, it's this particular point and the sculptors in particular within it. We do not have the time. I could teach a class on this alone, this page, single page. But what I will say is that it has been articulated. We understand the situation. We have articulated it back and forth between Matondi, Kinyanya, Mbera, Robin Mbera, and Duke Kombo, and all of those constructs have been included here. This is what makes these gentlemen world class, number one. Number two, this is also what separates Kenyan rock and stone sculpture from the rest of the world. Next slide, please. Now, also, in terms of time and space, this photo is the basis for an upcoming of sculptors, which if you ask yourself within the context and construct of African art, one of the things that has been lacking is the fact that you can never go back before the colonial period. From post-colonial independence backwards and understand who was doing what at that time. This photo, and all of these people are living, we thank God, shows Mzee William Matondi. We don't know, he's probably about 100. Okay? He doesn't know precisely how old he is from what I can gather. But he is the ultimate master sculptor. This is Kinyanya's father. This is Peter Kinyanya, the pioneer. And this is Kinyanya's nephew. This photo is very important for the latitude construct of time, and also confirms that there is basis for Kenyan rock and stone sculpture historically, which to date has been unanchored. So that is why this is important as a construct. Next slide. This is an important slide geologically, because if you look at the Rift Valley from South Africa to Jordan, its widest peak or widest length is in Kenya. Now the implication of that are that Kenya has naturally occurring many more stones because of this geological construct. Again, I could teach another course on this alone, the impact. But you notice basalts and related aspects which keep continuing to flow up. The key point is Kenya has been blessed with the widest points in its in the rift between Jordan and South Africa, but equally occurring is the multiple number of stone types that emerge, which again have not been actually anchored and will be anchored as an ongoing reconciliation of TMMSAC to what these people implicitly do in an explicit manner, specifically Mutondi and Robin and Kinyanya and Kombo. Next slide, please. Okay, guys, I'm going to move fairly quickly. The only thing I'll say is that you can see the number of different stones which are occurring, 27 different types, and that's only in 111 pieces. That comprises probably about 25% of the total of TMMSAC's collection. So we have an unbelievable wide berth of stone types, which all require different ways and mechanisms of addressing them. Next slide, please. This is taken from the from the exhibition. We don't have time to continue. Let's continue on. Next slide, please. This is important. This is the commission that Gerard Mutondi completed in 2015, A Family at Prayer, which was commissioned by my daughter and myself. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is the timeline. Why am I mentioning this? This is very important because basically it took 5 years from initial contact to more or less completion. These processes don't take a long time, but we have learned how to compress time. That's also one of the things that most people who are going to do this the first time are not able to actually process. So we are able to do that, and we're happy that we can do that. Next slide, please. This piece is this. This is what Mutondi presented to Ralston Academy, from which they made the decision to accept to do the 12 to 15 ton process. Next slide, please. That's a very good photo of Mutondi in action, as it were. Continue, next slide. Mutondi has been an award winner of multiple awards predicated on the work of that sculpture. Again, when he's offered a time slot, he can explain himself, as can all of the other sculptors within TMMSAC. Next slide. I want to move speedily through this. This shows you the environment from which the raw stone came from. Next slide. Next slide, please. This informs you on the mine itself. Next slide. Continue on. Next slide. This is an important one and helpful. This is scale. This is providing you with a construct of scale. So Mutondi has gone from this to this. And that is why I believe they are world class. He found the mine, we went, we visited it, we purchased the stone, and continue on. Next slide. This will show you what actually are the steps. Next slide. You can see this is not for children. This is a truck which you can see even the wheels it was that heavy. We had a 20-ton crane, 25-ton crane that had to lift it out. Next slide. You can see the various positionings. Next slide. Now, this is also very important because this is also, I consider to be, this to be a very important slide because it shows the impact that this was having educationally on the children who were watching the evolution of this sculpture being made, and is likely a signal on how TMMSAC will likely enter into the public community arena for new coordinates. But basically, this was started by Mutondi himself. Continue on. First cut. Again, I'm not going to, I wasn't sure whether he was going to make it. Next slide, please. This provides you with an understanding of scale. Next slide. Shaping. Next slide. Next slide. Deep sculpting, detailing in the plinth. Next slide. Decommissioning. Next slide. And the finished commission. That took a good 4 or 5 months. It was not, as I say, it was not an easy process. But again, I give Mutondi immense credit, and I am grateful that he was able to complete this process. And by the way, just for your guidance, the academy, my daughter's school, was concerned that what happens if you end up with a rock that doesn't work? What do you do with the stone? That's not what you said it would look like from the beginning. There was trust and challenges. I know I have to go. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. This is Afro-Cubism, which is basically exhibition scale size. Robin Ukeombera. You can see his style. He talks to the stone instead of listening. He's a hard guy, but very quiet. He talks through his art. Next slide. These are the processes. Next slide. Next slide. And by the way, this is the Art and Finance Conference, which, next slide, please, which was graced by the First Lady, former First Lady, Margaret Kenyatta, who gave the keynote address. And you can see First Lady, at that point, the Cabinet Secretary for Sports, Culture, and Sports, Arts, and Culture. This is Lydia Galavu. If you know her, I think she's the curator at the Nairobi National Museum. This is Robin himself, and that's yours truly, Mutuma. Next slide. This was Elephants and Rhinos, which is a group show. 111 pieces at the Nairobi National Museum. Continue, next slide. We don't have time. Continue, next slide, please. What's important to understand is that this lady here is the Minister for Sport, Culture, and Art. And she came and she gave us 90 minutes of her time to review with the individual sculptors this exhibition, because it was that important. We can discuss the reasons behind that later. Thank you. Next slide. That's her signing, the Cabinet Secretary signing the guest book. Next slide. From there, we were selected as TMMSAC to be featured sculptors at Kenya House 2020, which ended up being in 2021 because of the Olympic aspects. And we were very grateful that we were able to be highlighted. Next slide. Next slide. From post-COVID, basically what we did is we moved now into more of an academic arena. And we have started speaking to universities. The first one was the PhD class at the City University of New York, Professor Joshua Cohen, we spoke at the Modern Africa Art and Decolonization class. So that was very important. Continue on, next slide, please. This will give you a shot in time. Continue on, next slide, please. Just flick through them. You can see the different types and styles of work. Next slide. That's Kinyanya. Next slide, please. Next slide. And the different stones. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. No, go back one. Go back another. I wanted to basically also note that I spoke at the Burgundy School of Business's Cultural Economics MSc class late last year. And it was a very good presentation as well. I'm very keen to engage with academic institutions because I realized it also assists me in creating a sharper understanding and perspective. Next slide, please. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. Look, this is the end. In summary, I just want you to understand as we start, TMMSAC is now going to affirm how it wishes to interact. It wishes to focus on the physical to the phygital and digital, and not the other way around. We believe that we must be grounded in our history in order to understand what our future looks like. And we talked about this with Professor Jacob on Monday. Basically, what I'm here to explain is everything that we do not have the luxury of virtual constructs. We must be physically engaged because the world does not, I believe, have an appreciation for what I would call the trust element, which is virtual. But they do for the truth, which is what I consider to be the work that we as TMMSAC do. Everything that I've showed there, I can take you to. Every piece that I've presented is in the collection. We do not deal in the virtual constructs and then have issues related to who owns what, how did it come in, because we already have issues right now which are unreconciled as it relates to repatriation, restitution, and reparations. So my hope is that I can learn more from you as Caphe on how you are looking at things. How is your entry? So that we can have a much more constructive dialogue. But at the end, all I would like to say is thank you very much for your time. And next slide, please. I would just like to say that aspirationally, the future remains unreconciled, but on the whole, more bright, unencumbered, and unrestricted than the past. So I am encouraged to run towards the carrot rather than running away from the stick. But still, the stick remains. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marangu. Ladies and gentlemen, now we'll take our tea from downstairs. There's a restaurant directly, below this particular room. How much time do we have, Dr. Bogna? Okay, so 20 minutes. 20 minutes for tea downstairs. See you later. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who are in the Caphe consortium, I've shared on the WhatsApp group, I've shared a link to KUTV. This particular symposium is being streamed live on KUTV. So you can share with your friends, with your associates, with your relatives, especially for our participants from outside Kenya. Your friends will be able to follow from wherever they are. Thank you.
Vera Beauty and Fashion College is focused on being the leading technical and vocational training institute in the region. Our team possesses in-depth knowledge and extensive experience in the industry, offering thorough training in cosmetology, hairdressing, interior design, creative arts, training of trainers, nail technology, and fashion design, with branches in Nairobi, Thika, Meru, Eldoret, and now in Mombasa. Our courses ensure that learners are completely equipped with knowledge, competency, and employability skills. Enroll today to be a part of a